My name is Ovide Guesnon. I'm a deacon. Next month I will be ordained 36 years. I happen to have been in the first class of deacons that was ordained for the Diocese of Oakland. It's a pleasure, and I thank you for inviting me, because speaking about annulments is close to a lot of people. All of us know someone, some relative, that have been divorced and remarried, etc., and they're unable to receive the sacraments because they are not in a valid marriage. And it's hard for them, for many of them. They'd like to receive the sacraments, but they're prohibited from receiving it. By giving you this information, because a lot of people have erroneous ideas about what an annulment is, or even if they can get an annulment. And by obtaining an annulment, one can be married in the church again, and they can start receiving the sacraments. Before we start talking about what an annulment is, we really have to know what a marriage is. For many people, they think of marriage as a contract, right? How many think of marriage as a contract? Oh, you're wrong, man, you're wrong. Marriage is not a contract, and the reason it's not a contract is because when all the provisions of a contract are completed, then you can get out of that contract.
Till death do us part.
Yeah, but that's not a contract. What marriage is a covenant, and it's different. And we get the whole marriage model of what a marriage is, and what a marriage covenant is we get it from God. If you look in the Old Testament, God made a covenant with Adam and Eve. I'm going to be your God. I expect you to do this. Do you want to be with me? I'm going to put you in paradise, and someday I will bring you up to heaven to be with me. And I want you to produce and multiply and fill the earth. God made a covenant with Abraham. I'm going to make you the father of a great nation. He did it with Moses. Take my people, bring them to the promised land. So these covenants God made. Jesus Christ, when he ascended into heaven, what did he do with his apostles? The covenant he made with them. To go out, to preach my word, to go to all nations. So what we have in the covenant is that, number one, you have freedom of choice. God said, I will be your God. Are you willing to be my people? Are you willing to go out and produce and to spread the word? And it will be forever. That is the three essential things with a covenant. And this is what a marriage covenant is all about. That the two people, they have freedom of choice. They are making a lifelong commitment, and they are willing. They are open to having children. That constitutes the marriage covenant. There are some minor things that's in there, but those things can be put aside by the bishop. But the three things, the freedom of choice, the permanency of that marriage, and open to having children is essential. Now, when we talk about marriage, there are different types of marriages. You have what most of us deem is a sacramental marriage. A sacramental marriage is between two baptized persons. It does not necessarily have to be two Catholics. A Catholic can marry a non-Catholic who is baptized, and they are in a sacramental marriage. We have other marriages that are valid marriage or regular marriage, and then we have invalid marriages or irregular marriages. A valid marriage can be, a sacramental marriage is always valid. A valid marriage is not always sacramental. A Catholic marries a non-baptized person. With a dispensation, they can be married in the Catholic Church. They are in a valid marriage, but it is not a sacramental marriage. Two non-baptized persons are in a valid marriage, but they are not in a sacramental marriage. And then we have the irregular marriage, or invalid marriage, is which one of the persons has been previously married, they have been divorced, and they get married in a civil ceremony. That is an invalid or irregular marriage. If you are not in a regular, valid marriage, and you're a Catholic, you're not permitted to receive the sacraments until that is rectified. The church wants all of us to receive the fullness of Jesus Christ, to be able to receive the sacraments. And therefore, what the church has and does is has the court of law, and they will review your marriage and find out what type of marriage you're in. Whether you are in a, if you're in an invalid marriage, what can we do to get you in a valid marriage? And this is what the whole annulment process is all about. A sacramental marriage can never be annulled. That is, two people who are baptized, they have freedom of choice, that they are making a lifelong commitment, and they are open to having children. It can never be annulled. What can be annulled, and what the church does, and the tribunal does, is try to look into the persons, when they got married, at the time of marriage, what was their frame of mind? Is there anything that happened that does not make this bond sacramental? If for any reason were they did not have freedom of choice, Was a girl pregnant at that time and you got married because the girl was pregnant? Was this an arranged marriage? Were you psychologically ready to get married? I've done annulments where one of the couples had a mistress before the marriage, had a mistress during the marriage. Well, that person was not there to make a lifelong commitment to that person. So this is what's looked into to find out. And so, and if anyone, you know anybody in any type of situation, and I have some papers to give out, I'll pass around, have them go see a priest or a deacon. You know, and each case is individual. There are no two cases that's the same, believe me. You know, when we start answering questions, answering questions, you know, I can give you general answers, but specific, unless I know all the facts of the case, I couldn't give you specific. Even then, I'd probably have to call the tribunal to get information. Believe me, they're there to help priests and deacons. They have the canon law, they know, they handle hundreds of cases. And they're always there to back us up and to give us advice. But anyhow, there are different types, like I said. With the annulment, that first you come and the person is married outside the church. They're in a second marriage. They have been divorced and they got remarried and they'd like to return to the sacraments, so they come see a priest or deacon, and what can you do to help me? So what we do is we start talking to them and we start filling out a preliminary form that's sent to the tribunal. What I'm going to do, I've got two folders, and I can send one here. You can look through and then pass it along. And it's some of the forms they have, but it's, first of all, it's a form for marriage. When you first come to get married, you go see the priest or deacon, and you fill out a Form A and a Form B. You fill out the Form A, and you need a witness to fill out the Form B. Everybody has gone through it. You may not remember it, but you filled it out. For me, it's been almost 50 years, and I don't remember doing the paperwork. But anyhow, this form, and these forms are kept. When you fill this paperwork out, when you apply a marriage, they're kept forever. All these paperwork are put in there, and it's kept in there, in this little form, in the church you're married, and they keep it in a very safe place. Because if ever you apply for annulment, this is going to be the first thing they're going to pull out. They're going to want to see this. And they want to check that paperwork to make sure everything was done right. That if you needed a dispensation, if you were a Catholic, first of all, you got to remember, a Catholic is required to marry a Catholic in the Catholic Church. Anything outside of that, you need a dispensation from the bishop. So if you were to marry a non-Catholic, you would have to get permission from the bishop. If you were married to somebody who was never baptized, you need dispensation from the bishop. And all of that goes, fill out the forms, it comes back okayed by the bishop, and all of that's put in there. So, when you go for an annulment, that is pulled out, and all this paperwork is checked out. there are different types of annulments. And that's why I say you have to know the specifics. The one that's, they call it an annulment, but it's not really an annulment, is called a lack of form. And this is the one where a priest or deacon will kiss you. Because it's just paperwork. Remember I said, a Catholic is required to get married in the Catholic Church. Well, what happens, the young couple, they go to Reno, they go see the Justice of Peace, or they go see some minister that somebody knows, and that's where they get married. Well, when they get a divorce later on, they come back, and we see the marriage license, that they were not married in the Catholic Church, kiss you. Because we just got to show that you were a baptized Catholic, or one of the parties was a baptized Catholic, that you did not get married in the Catholic Church. Send that paperwork to the bishop, and they sign it. Okay, and that's easy. The formal annulment is when you've gotten married in the church, you've done all that paperwork, and then that's when it works again. There is no time limit on trying to get an annulment. Sometimes it can take years because you've got to have witnesses. You have to have a valid reason, and they will check it out, and if you have a valid reason, then they will accept it, they will take on the case, they will send you more paperwork to fill out, you gotta fill out your life history, and this is where a lot of people give up. They don't want to go through the process. For some, it is very hurtful, because it brings up a lot about why your first marriage broke up. And a lot of people don't want to go through that again. It's painful for them. If the priest or deacon is doing their job, they're helping you to cope with it, to work through it. And it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of prayer. It's not easy. And a lot of times it can be frustrating trying to get in touch with witnesses. Sometimes witnesses are spread throughout the diocese or in some other diocese. And the church is required. I think on the last page I have something on there about the cost. That was the last cost that they gave us. And some of the stuff that it goes through with the tribunal. But anyhow, they go through all of this process of talking to witnesses, getting all this information. The amount that you're asked to pay is only a small portion of the actual costs. Because it can get very expensive, especially when they got to go out of the diocese and the other diocese got to do their work. You know, somebody got to pay somebody to do all this stuff. And so the cost goes up. But your cost is minimal. Okay. As I said, you have the lack of form, which is technically not an annulment. You have a formal annulment. In many cases, you have, it's called legamen. And this actually works with a lot of non-Catholics who have been married, divorced, you know, and you've got to go through these different ceremonies, through these different annulments for each person to find out where, if valid marriage existed. You've got to remember that I said